Yeah.
This is going to be a good one.
Back on the diamond.
One of the best regular season teams of all time in Major League Baseball.
And one of the worst collapses.
I wouldn't even call it a collapse, just what the fuck happened? Ooh. All right, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm your co-host, Dominic DiTolla, sitting alongside co-host Chris Quinn. And we did it. Episode 100.
That's it, man. We're here. Couldn't even think about it back when we started in like 6 months ago or whatever it was.
It was about a year ago we started.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. 100,
August,
man.
100. C-Note episode. And very special episode, too. We're talking about, as I stated before, one of the greatest baseball teams of the regular season in MLB history, the 2001 Seattle Mariners.
And they really are an interesting, the way this team kind of came together, because I wanted to start it because we always started a little before, but back in like 99, they had Ken Griffey Jr. and Alex Rodriguez, which had to have been just like a ridiculous hitting 1-2.
Well, in 95, when they made the playoffs that year and basically saved baseball in Seattle.
Yep.
They finished second in 96 in the AL West. 97, they had one of the most potent offenses in MLB history and won the AL West but lost in the divisional round. 98 was kind of a down year. 99 was even more of a down year. And that offseason, because he had one more year left on his contract, they traded prior to the 2000 season, Ken Griffey Jr., to the Cincinnati Reds.
Yep.
They picked up a very important replacement for him, which we'll discuss down the road. But after the 2000 season, where they win the West again, they make it all the way to the ALCS and lose to the Yankees, 4-2. That offseason, Alex Rodriguez wants a new contract that expired. First overall pick in the 1993 draft. Obviously, he had enough service time, and he chooses not to stay in Seattle and goes to Texas.
Well, they really tried to lowball him.
They really did, yeah.
That was what they were talking about in this time. The ownership in Seattle was really running it, trying to be like a business, and I think they...
Very frugal. Lou Piniella, their manager, ran in, and a couple years down the road, he just up and quit because he was like, you're not showing a commitment to win.
Exactly. And Alex Rodriguez, unfortunately, was right to leave, but to lose him on a free agent just leave was pretty, like... For most organizations, that would be a big enough hit to where they wouldn't make the postseason next year.
They just collapse. And it wasn't like with Junior where they're like, look, you basically save baseball here. You want to be closer to your family in Florida. We get it. You can pick where you want to go. Oh, you want to play for your dad's old team?
Yep.
Go right ahead. Let's get some compensation at least out of this deal. It's a win-win for everybody.
Well, just thinking of those guys leaving, and I imagine 97, just thinking those guys leaving was just like, we're going to have to rebuild for a while. But they made moves in this offseason to really shore up this team.
One guy who left in 98, who's not with them currently, Randy Johnson.
Yep, that was the other one that I was going to bring up.
Trade. Now, they had another trade the previous season in 97. They needed a closer, and they basically just handed Jason Varitek and Derek Lowe to the Boston Red Sox for a shitty Heathcliff Slocum, who did nothing. But the Randy Johnson trade, and the guys we'll talk about that they got from that trade, that was a good one where they mined Houston's deep farm system at the time. So, but this is the 2001 Mariners, so we'll get into it. A lot of people don't really know what to expect with this team after losing Junior and A-Rod coming into the season.
Yeah.
Need to replace both of them. But they made a couple of key offseason acquisitions heading into spring training. I'll go into the most famous one second. The first one I want to go into is you need a second baseman. They pick up Brett Boone from the San Diego Padres. Brett Boone, decent MLBer up to that point. Nothing special, not really an all-star, not a real statistical leader, but just a solid pro baseball player and second sacker.
I was going to say a solid second baseman. So he's going to do okay on the plate, but he's also going to do okay in the infield. So he's just a solid piece in your team.
Yeah, which is great, and we'll go into how that paid off.
I was going to say, because he has...
chemical enhancement for Brett Boone this season.
Possibly.
If you look at any pictures of him when he played in San Diego and then played in Seattle,
his forehead grew twice the size.
And we had those douchey frosted tips. Oh, thank God, early 2000s. I love you. But the biggest acquisition that they made was a future Hall of Famer, and including his career in Japan, the world's all-time hit leader, Ichiro Suzuki.
Because he played 7 or 8 years in Japan, and I think he had like 3 batting titles or something like that. So he had a career in Japan already.
Yeah, he was basically at the point in his career in Japan, it's like, well, there's no more mountains left to climb.
Exactly.
He wanted to go to Seattle. The team is run by Nintendo at this time, so I mean...
Well, Lou Piniella actually said it, which I thought was so great. They had this exchange program for, like, I think it was spring training or whatever, and he came over like 2 years prior.
So they knew who the hell he was.
Exactly. And they knew what kind of baseball player he was.
You need a right fielder, pick him up. And both moves were quite fantastic for them. Wanted to point out, as far as their lineup is concerned, they're doing just as well as those mid-90s Mariners. I wanted to point this out. They finished first in the AL in batting average at 288, first in runs scored, 927, first in RBIs, 881, first in stolen bases, 174, first in on-base percentage, 360, second in walks, second in OPS. So this lineup top to bottom
is just the best team in baseball.
Yeah, led by Ichiro. I mean, come on. That's a guy who won the batting title that year, won the Rookie of the Year, won the AL MVP.
Well, I thought it was interesting. He was the first guy to ever win. I think he stacked up the Silver Slugger, too, and I think he batted 350.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy to think that you're absolutely probably your best outfielder defensive is that good of a hitter.
Well, he led the league in hits, 242. I mean, he's classic singles hitter, although there are stories of him in batting practice where the guy had legitimate power. He just knew what his role was as a batter and executed it to a level. Like, you talk about guys who could play in any era. Ichiro would have hit like 450 in the dead ball era, probably.
Oh, my God. It would have been ridiculous.
But, hit 350, led the league in stolen bases with 56. Just a catalyst at the top of the lineup, led the team in runs, 34 doubles, 83 RBIs. I mean, or 69 RBIs. So, that's your guy. And rounding out the outfield, one of the guys we alluded to before, who came over from Cincinnati in the Griffey trade, is Mike Cameron. Mike Cameron's not necessarily a household name in baseball, but he was an all-star. And he's like your classic 20-20 guy, 20 homers, 20 stolen bases, although he much outperformed that season.
Everybody had their best season. That's
pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's like a team of everyone at the top of their game. And, he played Gold Glove caliber center field. Not really an analytics guy's wet dream because of his high strikeout totals, but the guy could get on base enough times to justify the strikeouts and did a really incredible job for them that season. But 99 runs, 25 homers, 110 RBIs, and 34 stolen bases. And then rounding out the outfield, they had veteran Al Martin. For whatever reason, Mark McLemore, who could play like 8 positions on the field, just ended up in left field for them. And he's in his late 30s at this point.
I thought him in this lineup was interesting because they were saying like he could play any position for us, which is so important, and that was one of the things to give guys rest throughout the season. Which is like looking back, you have to be like that's why they were really dominating all the series.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, but he would almost always play left field as his go-to position.
And he put up 39 stolen bases, 59 RBIs, and hit 286 for him.
Yeah. Fuck.
And also on this team, he's like the last holdover from the 90s is their designated hitter who's now in the Hall of Fame, Edgar Martinez. Jay Buhner is pretty much injured and out of the league. Griffey's gone. A-Rod's gone. All those guys from the mid-90s.
Yeah, Jay Buhner played like 17 games in this, and it was his last season. But, Edgar Martinez ends up stepping up in,
Hit 306, led the team in OPS. 40 doubles, 23 homers, 116 RBIs, and because he had a fantastic hitting eye, 93 walks.
Yeah.
I mean, he's your cleanup hitter in this absolutely stacked lineup. And then you get to the infield. John Olerud's playing first base. I think we had discussed him in a previous episode. And he's a former league AL batting title winner. Had tremendous season, 91 runs, led the team in walks with 94, 32 doubles, 21 homers, 95 RBIs with 94 walks.
Yeah, they were just a great offensive team and a great defensive team. Like there wasn't really holes in this team.
David, and the left side of their infield with David Bell and Carlos Guillen, they had great seasons. Carlos Guillen is one of the guys that they got in the Randy Johnson trade, who later, he had his best seasons actually after he left Seattle. He was a great player for the Detroit Tigers in the late 2000s and early 2010s. And then behind the plate, veteran Dan Wilson, he's like one of the last guys like Martinez. He handled the pitching staff really well and, had a good offensive season, 20 doubles, 10 home runs, and really handled a young pitching staff very good.
Yeah.
And before I go into the pitching staff, let's just talk about Brett Boone for a second.
All right. And the RBI season that he had, because it was such a... If you look at his seasons with San Diego and this one, you're like, is that the same player?
It's not the same player. Let's just say when he was in Cincinnati, Atlanta, and San Diego previous to this, he was an average, he's a replacement level player.
Yes.
It's like, yes, this guy should be starting in Major League Baseball. Shouldn't be making any all-star teams. Shouldn't be setting statistical records for second baseman.
No, and that's the thing that people point at with this season and what he did in the offseason.
Yeah. Do you want to go into what he did in the offseason?
Give it to me, man.
No, you do it.
No, because it's ridiculous. I mean, and this is the thing about Major League Baseball at this time was they weren't testing anybody for almost anything.
No.
So it was almost like you had a free reign of what do you want?
Yeah, what can I get away with?
And he technically didn't get away with it. Am I wrong with this? Because this is what was, I forget.
He didn't get away with it, but he got away with it for the season.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, he hit .331, 37 doubles, led team in home runs with 37, 118 runs, 206 hits, I think that's what I wrote down, and 141 RBIs.
The 141 RBIs is so ridiculous compared to his other seasons too, because it ties for second baseman, or is it?
It set the record for AL second baseman in the season, and he would sometimes take 2 or 3 seasons to amass that many RBIs. So something's kind of fishy going on right there. Not making necessarily any accusations, but his body type changed.
And I actually find this interesting because they say that your speed of your bat increases so much more when they were taking this. And I feel like if you look at anybody that's like, nah, it doesn't really help them all that much. You look at this career jump and you're just like,
well, he's probably, I think he was in his early 30s by then.
Yeah, he was tailing. So it's not like he was hitting his prime. He was definitely tailing off on a normal career.
Yeah, exactly. And he just extended it and became a mutant almost. Before we go into the kind of how the season played out, talk about the pitching staff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because they had a nice kind of mix of young and old, not necessarily world beaters at the time, but guys that just could effectively get it done and knew they had a lineup behind them that would keep them in every game in this steroid era.
Well, they had 4 guys with over 15 wins.
Yeah.
And which makes sense with how many wins they have, but they really had a lot of starting pitchers that played their full role.
Yeah, at the top, who later was a World Series hero for the White Sox down the line, Freddie Garcia, one of the players they got in the Randy Johnson trade, which was pretty impressive.
Well, if you look at these pieces that get put together for this absolutely epic season, the 98-99 trades are extremely important.
Yeah, because they basically shored up the roster, and a lot of credit has to go to, we mentioned him in the Jeff Kent episode, general manager Pat Gillick.
Oh, yeah.
Pat Gillick is probably one of the best general managers for about a 30-year period in MLB history. Won World Series in Toronto, won division titles in Baltimore, went to Seattle, won division titles, and
let me say this with Seattle,
won with the Phillies.
He's doing it on a completely limited budget. So, like, on top of that, that's why this season is so ridiculous, because they literally lose A-Rod for nothing, and they still have all these pieces come in.
Well, they had Garcia leading the AL in ERA, 3.05, 18-6 record at age 24, led the team in complete games, shutouts, and innings pitched. And then behind him, you have the ageless wonder, Jamie Moyer.
Which I feel like when he's
38 in 2001. I think he pitched till like 2010.
Going into this season, I bet people were like, it's probably going to be his last season. That's why it was so funny. But
he's like the Rolling Stones of starting pitchers.
He has such a great season that after it, they're just like, whatever, 8 more.
He pitched 209.2 innings. He had 3.43 ERA, went 20-6 to lead the team. And then as your third starter, he was a really solid middle of the rotation piece for a long time for a number of teams. They have Aaron Seeley coming out, 15-5, 3.60 ERA, 215 innings pitched. And then Paul Abbott has a season for the ages just out of nowhere.
Well, that's what I feel like with some of these guys having seasons that are just way beyond who they were. I feel like in the locker room, just that vibe of winning went through everybody.
Yeah, you went 17-4. John Halama, another Randy Johnson piece. He won 10 games and did some spot starting and bullpen work.
Oh, okay.
And then the youngster Joel Pinheiro, who was 22, went 6-2 down the stretch in 11 starts. So, I mean, it's not like they have Schilling and Johnson in their rotation, but it's like you're deep. You got pros, couple good young starters, but like guys that get the job done.
Well, I feel like they don't have 2 all-stars. They have 4 top pitchers. So not necessarily like all-stars, but they have 4 guys who are completely reliable.
Yeah, and the bullpen was really good that year. It's pretty much a veteran bunch because the youngest guy is 27 with Jose Paniagua, but Norm Charlton, Arthur Rhodes, and then Kazuhiro Sasaki.
We got to talk about Sasaki because he's number 2 as the relief pitcher behind Rivera.
Yeah, Rivera, yeah.
Rivera, excuse me. And this is what I feel like closes their team.
Yeah, and he was a great closer for an extended period.
Because I think he had 45 saves out of 52 attempts.
No, he had a lights out season.
Yeah.
I mean, and we'll see when we talk about the All-Star game. But yeah, they were from top to bottom. You would have been like, okay, they won the division the year before, but Oakland's ascending.
This is the other thing. Their division is absolutely stacked. Oakland for this season has the
Moneyball train going. This is when it starts. All the wheels are in motion now for the A's. And then Anaheim had just come off a winning season in 2000. They didn't make the playoffs, but fuck, they won this World Series in 2002. You know, they're
still a good team.
Yeah, and Texas
just acquired
horrible pitching staff, but their offense at this time was so loaded that they could keep themselves in any game.
Well, they were like, look, you have to score 9 runs to beat us.
Exactly.
If you're going to do that, go ahead.
But they come out like gangbusters this season. April 2nd, 2001, opening day. They had a 4-0 deficit, and they ended up winning 5-4 against the A's.
Yep.
So it kind of really sets the tone for them. And what they basically do is just, I always say about baseball, because the season is 162 games, and I say this about most sports anyway, is you can't lose your season or you can't win your division in the first month, but you can also lose it in that first month. You can't win it, but you can also fuck yourselves over, and they do the opposite of that. They go 15-4, and they're playing almost all divisional foes. And you're really seeing this lineup really gel together of a mishmash of all-stars, newly acquired dudes like Ichiro.
Yep.
They're just scoring runs at such a rate, and the starting staff is holding up. None of these guys were like necessarily injured or anything. They stayed relatively healthy throughout the season.
Well, it's just crazy to think that they start off so ridiculous, but they keep it up for the entire season. So,
well, they went 20-4 through April and May, and then by May 22nd, they were 32-12 and up 10 games on the second place team,
which was the A's or whoever it was at that point. But yeah, because the A's were doing good that year too.
But I want to point out the importance of this is because when they're 32-12, they have a 15-game winning streak to follow that. So now you're up 47-12, and now you're up 17 games. Like, that's unbelievable. They actually lost. Their winning streak was actually broken by the Padres of all teams. They were fucking horrendous that season. But, they kind of close out the first half of the season with a 19-12 record after that, and they finish 63-24 going into the break.
And I thought this was interesting. Seattle was actually hosting the All-Stars that year.
Yeah, because Safeco, they built, it's always the house that Griffey built.
Yep.
And they had opened it in the middle of the 99 season. So what MLB usually does is whenever a new ballpark opens, within like maybe 5 years of it going up, they'll be like, okay, they get an All-Star game.
Yeah, which makes sense.
And luckily for the Mariners, because they're just absolutely beating the shit out of everybody.
I was going to say, they get a lot of guys on the All-Star team this year.
8 All-Stars. Like, I can't even, oh my God, I just can't even believe it. They have Edgar Martinez, Ichiro, Boone, and Olrud starting. And then you have Cameron, Garcia, Nelson, and Sasaki. And July 10th, the AL wins the All-Star game 4-1. And what I wanted to bring up in that first half, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Ichiro took not only this team by storm, but baseball and American society. I don't even know if you remember this season, but like everyone was wondering like, well, Hideo Nomo had an awesome rookie season in LA, but nobody has come over from Japan as a position player and taken the league by storm. Ichiro did that. Like, I remember one throw he had to hose Terrence Long at third base. I was just going to bring that up. Oh, my God. It's like a goddamn mutant throw.
Well, they call it a frozen rope, and every time they say that, I'm like, yeah, it kind of drifted. That one is such a straight bullet into his glove. It is unbelievable.
Hey, everybody. Just want to take a quick break to let you know that our Sports Experience podcast is brought to you by Engle Studio here, and they're here in Tucson for all your recording needs. I mean, he never stopped hitting once he entered MLB, but like when you saw that, you're just like, good Lord, this guy's 27. Could you imagine if he say he starts his career in America at 22?
Yep.
Maybe we're talking about Pete Rose is not the hit king of all time.
Like you were saying, like he had power, but he knew what he was there for, which was just to hit singles, lead it off.
Bunt. He was a great bunter.
Unbelievably great bunter. Yeah.
And he had speed at this juncture of his career.
Yep.
So, I mean.
And some of the best baseball intelligence. That's something that you can't, like, especially with his base running and all of that, he was so on it. That's why I feel like in this year, he just went from, like, who was that? They picked up, into, like, him being pretty much one of the biggest stars in baseball. Yeah, especially with going into the Asian markets. Obviously, that's baseball's big in Japan and shit like that. But like, it had to his fame had to have exploded there.
And the thing is, everyone around him is having a career year.
Yep,
I would say. I mean, the team itself has just come together. You're firing in all cylinders, and they finished the rest of July after the break, 13-6, and in August is when they really start turning it on, where you're just like starting to hear rumbles. This could be the 1906 Cubs, because up until the point, only one other team had won eventually as much as Seattle in a regular season. The Cubs finished the 1906 season with a 116 wins in, I believe, 154 games or maybe even fewer. But Seattle has a legit chance to challenge that record, and they're mowing people down.
Well, that's the thing about the baseball season is a lot of the times teams sometimes have 2 seasons, like before the All-Star break and after, and it was people were wondering if they're going to keep steamrolling. Like they knew that they were going to keep winning, but were they going to keep this ridiculous 15-game win streak? And then, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Everyone's kind of expecting like, oh man, there's going to be a drop off.
Yep.
And the reason they don't win, I wanted to bring this game up because I do remember watching this on ESPN Sunday Night Baseball. August 5th, 2001, they had this game in the bag and likely would have set the record if they win this game. In retrospect, they led by 12 runs twice in this game against the Cleveland Indians. And Cleveland we'll bring up later this season because their lineup is just ungodly at this point. They don't have any pitching. Outside of Bartolo Colon, but
they're like a better Texas, or they're better Rangers.
Well, you have Kenny Lofton, Omar Vizquel, Robbie Alomar, Jim Thome, Manny Ramirez. I think David Justice had gone by that point, but I mean, you're legitimately stacked everywhere.
Yep.
Travis Fryman's in that lineup. He was an all-star for them and the Tigers. So, it was pretty ridiculous. And during this game, Cleveland starts taking their starters out.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, it takes it all the way into the extra innings. They win 15-14. The game was 14-2 at one point, and they scored 13 unanswered runs. And little blip on the radar for Seattle, but I wanted to bring that up because we could be legitimately talking about the greatest regular season team of all time.
That's the thing that they were saying. It was like they should have had 117.
Yeah, they definitely should have. And even though they lost, you're still up at the beginning of August by 17 games. And starting at that point, their last 36 games, they go 29-7.
It's crazy.
I want to illustrate this because I had wrote it down. It was so baffling and interesting to me. In their final 75 games, they went 53-22. You're thinking, this is the team that fucks over the Yankees. Because when we're talking about this, from 96 to the year 2000, the Yankees won 4 World Series in 5 years. I mean, including entering 2001, a three-peat.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's the team to beat in the AL, and the Mariners had a winning record against them in the regular season. They had a winning record against everybody.
Which is so rare. A lot of the times, just one team will be better than you. But literally, they had a winning record against every single other team. So going into this postseason, nobody was betting against them.
And nor should they have.
Yeah.
And in the first round, because Oakland was the wild card that year, they had to go play the Yankees in a 5-game series, which I think they were up 2-0, and they just fucked it away. I think that was the Jeter series with that weird throw that he had. He wasn't even supposed to cut it off, and they threw out Jeremy Giambi. But they're playing the Indians, like we said. AL Central winners, 91-71. Stacked lineup. Oh, another guy I failed to mention who was really good, Ellis Burks, was in their outfield that season. Yeah. So, I mean, but they in this division series, it doesn't start out too well for Seattle.
No, they lose the first game.
They get shut out by a not rotund Bartolo Colon.
Yeah.
Do you even remember how good that guy was before he just turned into hedonism bot from Futurama?
Which is so weird when guys blow up but still play professional sports, because he got up to 225, 250, whatever he was. It's hard to...
He was probably pushing $3 bills at
I was going to say,
yeah.
It's hard to look and tell because he was legitimately fat.
Yeah, but at this point, he was still
a regular
spelt, and
a regular pitcher.
Really good when he played in Cleveland. I mean, really good. So they lose 5-0. In Game 2, Edgar Martinez is the hero along with David Bell. They both hit home runs.
Yep.
So they end up winning that game 5-1. And then in Game 3,
well, this is what I thought it was interesting, because this is really the first Ichiro in the armor, because they end up getting crushed.
Yeah. I remember watching this game. It was an afternoon game, I remember, in Cleveland. And this was a game where kind of there were naysayers for the Mariners that season, like, oh, well, let's see how they do in the playoffs. You know, they just maybe got hot during the regular season. And this was a game where Cleveland's lineup, you saw how good they truly were as hitters. And they stuck it to them.
It's such a ridiculous display of, because you wouldn't think Mariners with 116 wins would lose a game like this.
And a great pitching staff.
Yes.
Like, they lost 17-4. It was embarrassing.
Yeah.
And people at that point were just like, Cleveland's going to close them out. That's what they're going to do.
Which would have been the most ridiculous season ever, to tie the record in wins and then lose your first playoff, the ALDS. It would have, I can't even, but they go on.
Yeah, so game four, Cameron had a couple big hits, and they get, I think Martinez had another homer, so they win 6-2.
Yes.
Game 5, Jamie Moyer goes nuts. Jamie Moyer probably pitches the best postseason game he has to this point in his career, and arguably best ever for his career, unless you count the World Series win in Philadelphia when he's like 50.
Against one of the best offensive teams. That's something that it's a really great Game 5.
They had a lot of double plays. Moyer's a ground ball pitcher, keeping the ball low and out of the strike zone, and gave him 6 good innings, and they win 3-1.
Yep.
So they make it through, and I wanted to point out, during this series, Ichiro hit 600. It's not like he just I think at every big moment of his career, it was just like, nah, Ichiro will do it.
Yep.
Ichiro's going to do it.
He's one of the most reliable, as a team, he's one of the most reliable players that you could ever have, I feel like.
And he was fantastic.
Oh, he was
so good. And this sets up the matchup everyone wants to see.
Exactly. That's why this is a great postseason, because the teams you want going against each other are Yankees meet up with our 0-1 Mariners. It's not like we're fans of them. We're just talking about them. Calm down.
But doesn't really break Seattle's way and looks a lot like the previous season's ALCS.
Well, I want to say this, because the Yankees have a great team.
They went to the World. They should have won that World Series that year.
They're a dynasty,
except for Kurt Schilling.
But that's the thing about these teams ascending and descending, is this is what people thought would be the next dynasty.
Yeah.
With this regular season, they were thinking oh shit, Seattle's going to be 3 out of 4 champions. This is going to be exactly what we were seeing with the Yankees. And the Yankees go in and just dominate them.
Like we talked about how Seattle had good pitchers, a number of them. The Yankees have horses in this series. I mean, Andy Pettitte, Mike Mussina, Roger Clemens all roided up. I mean, this is not who you want to run into and have your offense go stagnant, because their lineup's also really fucking good too. And Game 1, Andy Pettitte, who was, when you look at his postseason stats, you're like, man, this guy's Hall of Very Good player.
Yeah.
And they go out in Game 1, lose 4-2. Game 2, Mike Mussina's the pitcher, and they lose 3-2. So, I mean, they're in these games, they're just not pulling it out.
And this is the thing, is they lose, those 2 first games are in Seattle.
Yeah.
So they lose 2 games in Seattle, and then Lou Piniella's like, look, we're going to bring this series back to Seattle. We're going to win at least 2 of the next 3 games.
Yeah.
And it's just, as a team, I just don't think that they were able to beat these Yankees, who had so much postseason experience.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the core of their roster, Jesus Christ. Game 3, though, you're thinking, oh, my God, they're turning around. Because the bats come out, they win 14-3. But Game 4, Arthur Rhodes gives up a really big home run. And Seattle should have won this game. They lose 3-1, and then all the wheels come off in Game 5.
That's the thing about
12-3.
Yeah, Game 4 was the one that everybody looks at that we're saying that's where the series could have turned.
Yeah.
And then Game 5, it was almost like, we're done.
Yeah, it's just well, we gave it our best shot, and it's well, I guess your best wasn't good enough. Yeah. But this is the thing. I mean, this was one of the best baseball teams, and one of the more fun baseball teams that's existed in like the last 2 decades.
Well, and the only other season that I can even be equated to is like the Golden State Warriors season, where they just like dominated in the regular season
and then lost in the finals.
And then lost in the finals. And it sucks to think that they didn't even lose to the eventual champions. And I hate to say it because I am kind of a D-backs fan, but they were like the third or fourth best team that year. They
totally.
were not the best team whatsoever.
You had a roided out Luis Gonzalez and then 2 of the greatest pitchers of their era.
And that's
that
it.
Just like carried them.
Yeah.
Pretty much the entire year and everything else. Go back and listen to our Curt Schilling episode before he goes crazy. It's really good.
I love that guy. Not for like anything he says, but I just love that he's out there in the world.
This is pre-social media. We have fun Curt Schilling.
Yep.
But no, the reason I want to bring this up, though, is since 2001,
yep,
Seattle has not made the playoffs. They've gone 20 years without making the MLB playoffs, and possibly might keep extending that streak this year.
Well, let's just put it in perspective. 2001, there's talks of it being a dynasty.
Yeah.
There are talks of it being the next Yankees, and then they didn't make another postseason for 2 decades.
Still haven't.
And it doesn't look like it's improving.
And another thing, this is probably their best chance to ever make a World Series. They remain the only team in Major League Baseball of the 30 who has never appeared in a World Series, which means teams like the Rockies and the Rays have made it with weird magical seasons, but Seattle, for whatever reason, in their, God, what is it, like, I think 77 they came in. So, yeah, 45 years has yet to make a World Series.
Yeah.
And they didn't even make a postseason for their first, 18. So it's sad to think about how good this team was, how many good players they had on it, and the Yankees just shit in their apple pie, basically. Like, I'm not saying that they would have beat Arizona. I mean, Randy Johnson probably has to know everything about the remaining players on that roster that he played with, but, they could have fallen apart because you saw what happened against the Yankees and their pitching staff, so I don't know if they would have won, but they should have made the World Series, especially the 116 wins.
I know, it's ridiculous.
But, thanks, Mariners, for a fun season. Hopefully you make the playoffs soon.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody. We love you. Thank you for making it to 100.
We're making it to 100.
Hey, everybody. This is just a stock message at the end of every episode. We hope you enjoyed whatever athlete and or team that episode was about. Just want to say, give us a quick follow on all social media. We have a YouTube channel, the Sports Experience Podcast, and we're on Instagram, DiTolla Dominic, and myself, C. Quinn Comedy. So give us a follow all around. We're always recording right here at Engle Studio. Thank you all very much.